want to say up front, we will be very judicious about your time. We will certainly be responsible and try to answer as many questions and answers as we can at the end of the evening. We have this posted from 5:30 to 7 tonight. I just got a lot of feedback, so I'm going to just 1 second. One of our presenters, please go on mute. Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a few of those technical issues that happened tonight. Just to let everybody know at home, if you're at home, we cannot see you on video and we cannot hear you talking back to us. We'll go through kind of the ground rules, but just so you know, we are collecting information. We'll hear a number of question and answers, and we'll be happy to go through how to do that. But we do not have video of you, and we will not hear you speaking. Only our presenters are there. So again, I'll be very quick. We'll have at least 30 minutes of question and answer this evening. Next slide, please. First of all, I do want to take the opportunity to thank you very much for being here tonight. I think it's a really... I've got a lot of feedback there. We know this is such challenging times with the pandemic, and most importantly, we hope everyone is healthy and well, but we want to continue this engagement process. So tonight, there's a few things that we want to provide an update on. First of all, we'll do introductions. We'll go over the update on the Westminster process, where we're at with the city. We'll talk about the comp plan and preliminary development plan. We call that the PDP. We'll give an update on our outreach, and we'll also introduce you to the Uplands Community Collective. And then most importantly, we'll transition to the Q&A. Next slide, please. These are our presenters. I'll kind of MC as I talked about. Bonnie Nizelik from Norris Design is our land planner and landscape architect. She will lead us through the plan updates, and then we'll introduce you to Eric Kornacki with the Uplands Community Collective. I do want you to know all of our team is available tonight and will be here for the question and answer portion of this. So we have the 4 owners of the site from Uplands. We have our engineer, Todd Johnson from Terraforma, and then Paul is here as well on architecture. So we have all of our subject matter experts here to answer any questions. Next slide, please. Sorry, Bonnie, I think we're getting a little feedback there. Just a few ground rules or some ideas of how you can interact with us. So there's a little bit more engagement tonight. There's 2 things. If you'll look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see 2 buttons. The first is the Q&A icon. If you go down there, you can ask us a written question, and we will keep track of all of these. And again, try to get through as many as possible tonight. If we provide a written answer, that will be everybody will be able to view that. Additionally, you can make comments with the chat function. We will see those as well, and we'll try to answer those comments as well as part of the Q&A. As we transition here, one other thing I wanted to do, we always try to get a feel for who we're speaking to, who's in the audience. So I think we have a quick poll here. If you could just fill that out, just check what community you are from, and it actually allows us to focus our comments a little bit more. So if you can do that, the hosts and the panelists cannot vote, as you see, but if you would all just take a quick moment and click the neighborhood that you live in, and then we'll give you a few seconds here, and then we'll actually just put the poll results up. So Jasper, you tell me when you've got enough, and we'll just show briefly kind of where we're at. I think, again, just remember the functionality. You can hit us with Q&A and chat buttons, so we certainly can hear from all of you. We'll also make this readily available. We will put the question and answer back on the community website, so you can see our answers in written form as well to this material. Jasper, let's go ahead and show the totals on that, or maybe we'll come back at the end with that. There we go. So we kind of see we've got more Westminster at large, 33%, but the far majority are from the Shaw Heights neighborhood, which has always been very active. So I appreciate that. Maybe we'll come back at the end, Jasper, and run that one more time as people continue to join the meeting. Just a couple of things. I know we're going to have people logging in at all different times here. Feel free. This is just a little introduction. Use the Q&A and chat buttons. I think we're going to transition here now. We all know the site. This is the Uplands community, the 5 separate parcels that embrace Shaw Heights, Observatory Heights, and all of the surrounding neighborhoods. The next slide here is actually the process, and we wanted to start with a thorough process update. So I'm going to transition to Bonnie, who again is our land planner, and she can give us kind of an update on the process. Thanks, Bonnie.
Perfect. Thanks, Marcus, and thank you all for your time this evening. Jasper, can you head to the next slide? So on most of these plan slides and the slides that I'll be walking through tonight, you'll see there's a vicinity map showing where parcels A, B, C, D, and E are. We use those terms quite a bit, so I want to keep that on the slides so that everyone can keep track of each of those parcels. So as Marcus said, wanted to give you a quick update on where we are in the process, where we've been so far, where we are today, and where we're going in the future. So on the left side of the screen, you can see the comprehensive plan amendment. So that affected parcels B, C, and D, or sorry, B, D, and E. Updated some comp plan land use designations, which we'll get to shortly. That was completed in February of 2020. This middle section has three different boxes. First is the annexation. So there's a small portion of parcel B that needs to be annexed into the city of Westminster. Along with that, we're doing a preliminary development plan for parcels A, B, C, D, and E. Many of you have probably seen versions of this plan to date. It's been on the city's website as we've gone through some initial reviews. We're actually updating that plan right now to show some additional public land education, refine some numbers and unit types, and we're also removing some of the detail. So that plan will provide an overall framework, and then additional details will be worked through with the next step. So you all have the opportunity to provide additional feedback on that. At the same time, we are doing what's called a master official development plan, and that's just for the center square parcel, parcel A. And that just provides a little bit more detail and specificity on the development of parcel A. All that stuff is ongoing right now, and we hope to make a resubmittal sometime later this month. In the future, likely starting in fall of this year, we'll be doing site-specific official development plans and final plats. Parcels B, C, D, and E will need to comply with the preliminary development plan. The site-specific official development plans and final plats for parcel A will need to conform to both the preliminary development plan and the master official development plan. So we expect each of those parcels will have multiple neighborhoods and multiple filings and continued opportunities for engagement. Those site-specific plans will have a lot more detail regarding lots, local streets, details on private parks, what the architecture looks like. So a lot more detail and a lot more opportunity for feedback. Next slide. So from there, we want to walk through the comprehensive plan and then the proposed framework for the preliminary development plan for each individual parcel. Next slide. So this is the city's existing comprehensive plan. So the piece that's pulled out in the upper right of the corner and highlighted in purple, those are the 5 parcels that we're reviewing tonight and the land use designations that exist. So the lower left hand, you can see there's the yellow parcel Bs. We have kind of the orange and red striped square parcel. Just to the right of that is the pink striped parcel. Thanks, Jasper. And an orange parcel against that. In the upper right-hand corner, there's that green parcel. And then at the bottom of that image, we have another lighter orange parcel and a light blue parcel. So we'll walk through each of those in detail. Next slide, please. So parcel A, center square between 84th and 88th, Lowell and Federal Boulevard. So this has what's called a TMUND comp plan land use designation, which stands for Traditional Mixed Use Neighborhood Development. This is showing, or this land use designation allows us to develop up to 18 dwelling units per acre and a maximum of 1 commercial FAR. It allows uses such as apartments, condos, townhomes, single-family residences, both attached and detached, and then a variety of retail uses and personal services uses.
Hey, Bonnie, I'm going to interrupt you for one moment. Folks, there's a few people that have put in the chat that they can't quite see the map because they're seeing Bonnie's picture. Just if you all know, if you scroll to her picture and go above it, there are 4 bars there, or you can drag the entire picture box away from there. So that's probably an important thing because we show that this map up in that corner a lot. So I would just grab that whole box and move it away from there, or change the image, the thumbnail of that. So go right ahead, Bonnie. I just want people to be able to see the map.
Okay, let me know if we get some more comments on that and we'll pause one more time.
Great.
So going to the next slide, parcel A. So this is showing the framework that exists in our proposed preliminary development plan for that center square parcel. So as we saw on the previous slide, we're allowed up to 18 dwelling units per acre. The proposal here is for a maximum of 1,531 residential units over 150 acres, which creates a density of approximately 10 DUs per acre. We're also anticipating 30,000 square feet of commercial uses, which are shown in the middle right of that image. There's a diagonal hatch. We expect that to be kind of the key entry into the neighborhood and might have ground floor retail or other, small type office or personal uses. Other key pieces about this image, you can see the overall street network in these thicker dashed lines that shows the general collector road network, which is consistent with many of the plans you've probably seen in the past. One change we made was the north-south street, Irving Street, is just a mirror image of what it looked like before. The reason for that is that we spend a lot of time studying the public land dedication for this site. So at Jasper, if you're able to still show yes, perfect. So at 86th between Federal and Irving, if you could just slide up. If you could just slide down to the middle of Irving, sorry about that. Yeah, perfect. So just to the right of Jasper's cursor, you can see a light gray hatch. That is showing public land dedication. So that's a future 10-acre public park that is a key component to this entire neighborhood. If you can go up to the upper left image, or yep, there you go. We have another public land dedication. So that's an 11-acre park. So those are both public parks and are key features for this community. Other items you can see on this image are arrows. So those are showing proposed or potential access locations. And then we're distributing those 1,500 units throughout this overall parcel. So again, it's in compliance with the comp plan land use designation and is actually below the allowed density. Next slide.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say for everybody who's joining, we've had a number of people join in the last few minutes. This is Bonnie Nozelik. She's our land planner. She's giving us an update on the planning that we've been working on parcel by parcel. So we're just jumping right in. We'll come back and talk about community outreach. So Bonnie, go right ahead.
Perfect. So the next parcel we're going to look at is the southwest parcel, parcel B. So the upper right map, you can see in orange, there's two pieces, one on the north side of Bradburn, one on the south side of Bradburn. And then the bottom right image shows the comp plan land use designation, which is R5. So that allows density up to 5 dwelling units per acre, and each of those are counted separately. So 5 dwelling units per acre north of Bradburn and 5 dwelling units per acre south of Bradburn. And that allows a variety of residential uses, including single family detached and attached, duplexes, patio homes, townhomes, and condos. Next slide. And here you can see our framework plan within the PDP for parcel B. So again, like the previous image on the far right of this parcel, you can kind of see 2 hatches. On the north side of Bradburn, again, it says public land dedication, 3 acres, just along Lowell. So that will be 3 acres of public park. Just to the south of that, you can see the letters BC, 3.28 acres. That's identified as a view corridor. So again, it won't have development. It will be preserved for that view corridor and likely land to be dedicated to the city. And then at the very south of that parcel, you can see another PLD hatch. So that's 3.76 acres. So again, that location at the south end of the parcel is for public park. Going back to land uses, the north side of Bradburn, we're proposing a maximum of 82 units. That's 5 dwelling units per acre. And then the south side of Bradburn, we're showing 26 units, which is about 2.0 dwelling units per acre. So below the 5 units per acre that were allowed. And again, we expect this will be a mix of single family detached and attached residential uses. Next slide. So the next parcel we're going to look at is parcel C West. So upper right, you can see it's the parcel just at the southeast corner of 88th and Federal. And then the bottom right image, you can see kind of that pink candy cane hatch. That means mixed use. And mixed use allows 8 to 36 dwelling units per acre and up to a 1.5 combined FAR. This parcel allows a variety of residential uses, apartments, condos, lofts, and townhomes, as well as offices, personal service, and retail or live work uses. Next slide. Parcel East is just the eastern half of that same parcel. So again, you can see in the upper right, it's kind of the eastern side of that. The bottom right image, you can see that is a bright orange color. That means R18. So that allows up to 18 dwelling units per acre and allows only residential uses, apartments, condos, townhomes, and single family residences. Next slide. And here you can see our proposed framework within the preliminary development plan. So like the previous preliminary development plans you saw, central to this parcel on the north side of Clay, south of 88th, is public land dedication. So that's showing 2.92 acres. So again, that will be dedicated to the city for public park. We are proposing on the west side of this parcel, 370 units on 16.33 acres, which is 22.7 DUs per acre. Again, the land use designation allowed us to go up to 36. We are also proposing 11,000 square feet of office plus additional ground floor retail. The eastern half of this parcel has 247 units on 13.76 acres at a density of 18 DUs per acre, which is consistent with the comp plan land use designation. Next slide. And then finally, moving into parcel D, which is the southeast corner of 84th and Federal. This one's broken up into 2 parcels as well, west and east. So looking at the comp plan map at the bottom right, the western portion of this is designated R8, so that allows residential uses up to 8 dwelling units per acre and includes a variety of single family residences, duplexes, patio homes, townhomes, and condos. Next slide. And then parcel D East, you can see that's at 84th and Zuni. And then the bottom right image is showing that as office. So that allows a maximum FAR of 0.35 and allows uses such as professional and commercial offices. Next slide. And here you can see our framework within the preliminary development plan. So the far west of this parcel, again, you see those letters VC, which stands for view corridor. So that's a 3-acre parcel that will be preserved for views. No residential or commercial uses can be built within that. Just to the right of that and extending along the south, connecting to Cobblestone Park, you see PLD again, so 4.0 acres of land that will be dedicated to the city for public park.
Bonnie, I just want to add one thing here on the view corridors and the PLD that you keep referencing. I think one thing I want to stress to attendees, and we've had, again, another 5 or 10 folks join here in the last 5 minutes. We're just walking through the 5 different parcels and giving you an update of what is in the underlying comp plan and also then what our corresponding land plan is for that. I think particular to the view corridors and the PLD, one thing I want to stress to folks is these were items that we talked about last February in front of City Council and city staff, and both of us all talked about where the PLD, the public land dedication, would occur and these view corridors, how important it was to put that into our plan so people had that predictability and knowing where theirs are, really protecting those historic view corridors. So we're just showing that we are really trying to reflect those comments that we heard from everyone and actually putting them into the plan. So Bonnie, just a quick comment on that. Go right ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. So just north of that public land dedication, you see a bubble called PAD1 residential. So within that area, we're allowing 94 units. So that is over the 19.6 acres. That's a density of approximately 4.8 dwelling units per acre. And again, this parcel allowed up to 8. So a number, our preliminary development plan is proposing less units than that land use designation allows. And then on the east side, parcel D2, that is shown as office, so that will be preserved for office uses. And I happen to see a question pop up about FAR. So this parcel allows 0.35 FAR, and FAR is how commercial spaces are measured from a density perspective. So a quick example, if you have a 1 acre parcel that's 43,560 square feet, and you have an FAR of 1, that means you can build 43,560 square feet of building on a 1 acre parcel. So if you have an FAR here of 0.35, you can build 35% of the land area in square footage. So this 3.09 acre parcel allows us to build 47,000 square feet of office building. And I'm sure that's probably still confusing, so we can answer that question in more detail moving forward, but wanted to give that quick explanation. So again, residential uses on the west side, and then office uses on the east side. Next slide. And then finally, parcel E, this is located at 88th and Zuni, just south of Kamenish Park. This is just a 1 acre parcel. It has a comp plan use designation of private parks and private open space. So this allows for passive and active recreational opportunities, and they're typically owned by a homeowners association or similar entity. So it's called private because it's not dedicated to the city, but we can still make sure that it has public access to it. Next slide. And then the framework showing up in our preliminary development plan for this parcel, again, just shows it'll be used for private parks and private open space. Next slide. And with that, that's an overall update on what the comp plan land use designations allow, and then how we've refined our preliminary development plan to be both in conformance with that plan, but also reduce densities and add in those view corridors and public land dedications within each of those parcels.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. I'm going to jump back in here and address the community outreach portion of this presentation. We've got a great crowd. We do have 2 or 3 questions that have come in, a number of chat questions. So anybody in the audience, again, we cannot see you, we cannot hear you, but the Q&A button, just use that functionality to write us a question. We'll be happy to respond to that. And you can also use the chat room there and just provide a question in chat. We'll move it over to the Q&A. So again, we want to thank your patience. We know this is a different type of format, but it's something that we're all working through and really learning to utilize. And frankly, we think it's a great way during this time to continue the engagement. Just briefly, I just want to talk about the community outreach and give you an update there. We certainly have had an opportunity to kind of reset a little bit on the outreach and understand how do we look and transition from more of a philosophical discussion on the comp plan, right? All of that material that Bonnie just talked about, what the comp plan's allowed, and actually transition to site plan specific. Now what we're actually planning to build in compliance with that underlying comp plan. That's what guides us. It's what guides the city. So we want to go through a more kind of iterative process with the neighborhood to plan that site. So our next slide here, this is a philosophy, something that we've shown. Our method that we run is to listen and integrate and draw, but we need that to come to life during this PD plan development phase. We want to explore the same kind of integration from your comments. Next slide, please. I think, you know, we've always talked about this approach about concentric outreach, about why the most impacted neighbors, the folks from Shaw Heights, from Observatory Heights, all of you that represent those neighborhoods, how do we start with you, then go to the community and region at large and really understand the different levels of impact, the different level of opportunity, and how we blend and transition to your site. The first question I saw was actually about from ranch style homes, how do you transition to our community? It's exactly what we should talk about, is how we transition and mirror what's there and grow into a new development, modern development on this site. So we'll address that in more detail. Next slide, please. This is something that we've put together just as a little flow chart, and I'll go through each one of these phases to think about this next phase of outreach specifically to the PDP. So tonight we're in phase 1, just this idea of providing a community update and then going to the community collective introduction. If you can go to that slide, Jasper, I'm just going to walk through these as we go through each slide. So again, tonight we want to show you the underlying comp plan. Now that we've amended 3 of these parcels, the comprehensive plan is now set, if you will, for all 5 of these parcels. Now it's upon us, it's our responsibility to comply with that and bring forward a site plan that complies with that. Next slide. Phase 2 here, and I think this is something that we'd specifically like to have some feedback from all of you, is we want to engage now in this kind of preliminary plan collaboration. We want to go to your respective organizations, present kind of the transitions, those buffers, the sidewalks, the infrastructure, how we're connecting parks and trails to your neighborhood, and really talk about that. We saw a lot of focus earlier on parcel B. We want to hear from Observatory Heights. That really has been protected from a PLD, but how do we now make that transition from backyards and the homes that we're building there? So what we'd like you to do, there's a website there, info, or an email address, info@uplandscolorado.com. Just email us and say, we'd like to have one of these smaller listening sessions where we sit around a table, maybe it's outside or it's probably virtual for the time being, and we talk about the exact edges, where you live, how it comes into your community, and really collaborative talk about what we're proposing on each one of these parcels. After that, this next slide, I think it's also important that we take not only that feedback we get from the smaller groups, but then we allow for kind of a community charrette, right? We allow the community to say, these are issues that are of just vital importance to us. Maybe they're more regional in nature, more their connectivity. They're not only the adjacent neighborhood, but how does this function as a community as a whole? And so we've proposed 2 ideas here on the community charrette. The first thing we want to do is actually use a virtual format. And this is something that Bonnie's firm has put together, but we will use these virtual rooms to actually let you go into an open house. You can see on the top image there, the boards will be sent out. We will allow you to see a mock-up of the plan, to make comments in real time, and really integrate or interact with our site plan and give us specific feedback. I think there was a lot of confusion about what will Lowell look like, for instance. How will that feel? So we want to show that. I think the other thing here on the right, if we're allowed, of course, with COVID-19, we will do some type of an outdoor function where we can appropriately space, but allow you to come. Maybe it's a whole afternoon so you can all spread out, and we can have you come in and really go through dot exercises, give us specific feedback on topics that really matter to you and that are integral to making this part of your community. I think this next slide, and it's probably very important, like, what are these issues that you can really engage in? What do we need help on in planning? The first of those, and it's something that we hear every meeting that we have, is we want to talk about the parks and open space, right? The city, and it's certainly a great process that they will run, they will talk a lot about those PLD, what happens to the amenities in that private or public land dedication. But we're also going to have just community-wide parks. Some of the areas that Bonnie showed, we want to help you. We want you to help us plan those, to think about those amenity zone, what needs to be in there, what really brings this to life, maybe what's missing, and really could thread this back into the neighborhood. I think infrastructure has been the primary question, as I mentioned before. Exactly how do bike lanes work? What are the traffic counts? And how we can kind of go through that process with all of you to talk about, plan the infrastructure and the connectivity of the site. Lastly, is the Uplands community character. I think community character is certainly an interesting discussion today. And I think it's a lot more about how we are inclusive and how this community really represents the best of Westminster, what we want it to be. But so much of that is also how it integrates into the surrounding communities, from a trails, from the sidewalk, all of that. So we'd also love to have your comments. That can be about architecture, heights, the transition zones, all of those type of things. So these are the 3 items that we will have community charrettes on to really integrate your comments back into the site. Next slide, Jasper. And folks, sorry, as I'm talking here, I'm not getting to all your chats, but we will get back to them in just a moment. I think the just to kind of show this in vision form or image form, the idea here is really to take the feedback from all of your respective organizations and put it in a more envisioned community PDP. So our documents, our final documents, really show, hey, Observatory Heights on parcel B, this is the transition that needed to happen from the northern part of their neighborhood to our site, to Bradburn, and then the transition from Bradburn Dearborn as it moves into Shaw Heights. I think those are important elements, how we blend in. So we just have an example here of how all of this feedback, all of this, we should garner it and submit it as part of the Community Envision PDP. Next slide, please. So here's this kind of cycle of engagement, if you will, that we're proposing, and really what we've designed specifically because of the Westminster process. This is the phase that we're in now, the PDP to ODP. So what we're proposing here is really on these major issues, right? These fundamental issues that we talked about, the parks, the infrastructure, the character, the architecture, to go through the PDP and ODP, of course, submit to the city, most importantly, get city review comments and all the referral agencies. Go to the community, reflect on this with the community. Here's suggestions, here compromises, here's a way we could do it. And then basically take those and put it in our response, how we're responding, how we're showing this collaboration. We need to show compromises to hear from all of you about those edge conditions. So this is the cycle of engagement that we want to go through. Next slide, Jasper. I think I won't spend much more time. We're being great here. I'm going to check my time. We're at 6 o'clock, so we've done about 30 minutes here. We've got about 10 or 15 more minutes in our presentation, and then we'll transition to Q&A. I just want to say this again. We have redesigned, if you will, our outreach plan specifically to the PDP now. What we heard from the Planning Commission, what we heard from Council, what we've heard from all of you, and I recognize so many names on the chat, is to see we want to have more involvement in the actual site plan. So that's where we're at now, and we think this is the right way to really embrace your comments, your suggestions, your improvements to the plan. So that really summarizes it a little bit. I think next slide, and I think we have kind of a short break here while we hand off controls and let Eric. We're going to introduce you to the Uplands Community Collective. And I'm just going to say as a brief introduction kind of what this idea is. I do community outreach on a lot of projects, and we always try to do everything we can to integrate community comments and to really make the development feel like it's your neighborhood. But honestly, after the entitlement is over, meaning something zoned and all that, there's not always a continuation of that community engagement. Then it's under construction, right? And sometimes it feels, and I will tell you, we have heard from so many organizations, from so many residents about, hey, here's what we want to see here. Here's our ideas. Here's a way that this site needs to be. Agriculture, I won't go into it. So we've heard all of these, and we said, you know what? We need to go a step further. We need to create a nonprofit that is here for the life of this community that really engages on more regional issues. So the owners have gone through a very deliberative process to go find someone with the right resume to create a nonprofit to run what we call the Uplands Community Collective. So I'm going to hand it off to Eric. I think he's got the controls now, and then I'll come back and facilitate the Q&A. So Eric, if you could tell us a little bit about the Uplands Community Collective, please.
Sure. Thank you, Marcus. Just a quick check-in. Can you see my screen?
It looks great. I can read Uplands Community Collective with the logo on
it. Okay, great. Well, thank you for the introduction and the transition. I am very excited to be on the call today and introduce the Uplands Community Collective. I know that many of you probably have some questions what this nonprofit is about, why it was formed. I'll also say that we just launched our website right before the call today. It was kind of a push to get it done, but I'm happy to have that live at uplandscommunitycollective.org. So please take a look after this presentation, and I think there's a lot of good content there, more than I have time to go into today, but I look forward to being actively engaged in the community process moving forward. So before I dive into everything about the collective, I wanted to give a little bit about information about my background. I come from a nonprofit, the nonprofit sector, where I've spent the past 15 years doing community development that is place-based and is really focused on working to build the capacity and local leaders within a community to solve the big problems of their neighborhood. 2007, I started a nonprofit here in Denver called Revision. Revision was really about trying to rethink how we approach public health and economic and social issues, particularly in communities that have been marginalized and left out of the conversation, have not received investment, and lack the basic amenities for them to thrive and to prosper. Everything from access to grocery store, to safe sidewalks where their kids can walk to a park and play, to good schools in their community, or businesses that are thriving. So revision is really about teaching a community how it can address these problems. We began with food, and I know that's it's a kind of a central theme in this conversation as we're talking about this development. For me, food is really where I think community starts and culture starts. And so when we started working in Southwest Denver in the Westwood neighborhood, I simply began talking to mothers that were concerned about the lack of access to healthy food. And what I found is that there was a lot of interest in gardening and growing food and maybe being connected to tradition and heritage and knowledge that they had from a different place, but weren't growing food in the city. And so we simply, if I go back to that last picture, began hiring mothers from the community and training them as what we called community health promotoras. And their job, their paid job, was to go and teach their neighbors how to grow food right in their own yard. Over the course of a decade, we started over 2,000 private gardens in Southwest Denver. This was a way that we could help feed people where they were at, but also, and equally as important, begin building a community and shared relationships around the concept that as a community, we can come together and address bigger issues. So as we were building momentum around creating this community food system and really people awakening to one, the inequities in their community, but two, that they had the power to do something with it, we decided that we needed to get a grocery store in this particular neighborhood. And the community, after years of working together, we said, we're going to actually start a grocery store that we own, that we operate, that we have control over. And this really became one of the first models in the country of a low-income community starting a grocery store to provide for their food needs, bringing some of that surplus produce in from the community and being able to sell it back to their neighbors. And so this is really kind of the experience that I have in community development. As I got further into the work, I really started to see a lot of the structural challenges of continuing to fund nonprofit work, right? There's one day foundations are interested in funding the cause and the next day they're not. And so there just became this kind of constant cycle of chasing funding that really created barriers for the community to fully fulfill the vision that it had set forth. And so last year, I transitioned the leadership of the organization over to the community. I began doing some consulting work on how to do community engagement around equity, around issues of food justice and food access and housing, and et cetera. I was approached by the Uplands team and learned about the project. Coincidentally enough, I had actually seen the farm 84th and Federal about a decade ago. I was working with some Somali Bantu refugees, and we tried to get funders to look into acquiring the property, and we realized that the economics of it didn't work. And I think that in all of the work that I've done within community development, what I've seen is that so often nonprofit organizations are kind of at odds with developers that come in and maybe don't have a true community engagement process. And so that's something that I really wanted to help shape the Uplands project, and saying that, you know, we have the opportunity to shape a project on the front end and ensure things like equity and inclusion and community voice are really present in this. In addition, that we've got the ability to take a project and leverage significant economic resources into addressing some of the challenges that the surrounding communities face. I think there's a lot of parallels between Westwood and Southwest Denver and Shaw Heights and Federal Heights that I'm really excited to explore more. So as the Uplands Community Collective has been kind of getting off the ground in the past couple of months, I came on board in mid-February, and then obviously stay-at-home order hit. So we haven't been able to fully do the typical community engagement process the way that I would like to. And so it's been a little more targeted one-on-one conversations. And really, I think there's a lot of excitement from what I'm hearing for people about how do we take this development and leverage it into a community wealth building opportunity that is bringing amenities to the community, that is really kind of a catalyst for significant community revitalization that is at the benefit of people that have been left out for so long. And so we've kind of developed 4 major pillars of work that are slowly emerging, but I'm very excited to begin diving into here. The first and foremost, as I mentioned, my passion is food and agriculture. And so we're going to be looking at ways to really kind of turn the part of the farmland into a community serving food production space that is both producing food for our residents, but also creating educational opportunities, creating apprenticeships, creating actual paid job opportunities in agriculture, and using food, again, as the heart of the community that's going to bring people together, sharing food, cooking meals, really revitalizing or kind of catalyzing food-based businesses. I think there's so much potential with the assets that we have here to really showcase this kind of blend of agrarianism and new urbanism, and do so in a way that we're feeding our community. And I think that many people know that the impact that COVID has had on both our food system is a severe crisis in this country. The economic impact when we've had millions of people losing jobs and needing to turn to food banks. I think that this is a chance to show and really demonstrate a model of how we can feed our community and become more resilient and sustainable in the process. The second pillar of work is really workforce development. There's such a great potential here to develop apprentice programs, job certification programs, really kind of create a job pipeline where we are training and or positioning and matchmaking construction workers within the community. Westminster Public Schools has a great, Westminster High School, I should say, has a great career and technical education program that focuses on construction and trades. How do we get students positioned to the day they walk out of school that they are working on the job site, building homes in their community, or for construction workers that live in the community but are building somebody else's community. I think this is an opportunity for them to have jobs building houses in this community where they're not having to commute, and then these are homes that hopefully that they would be able to one day afford. In addition, when we look at the other kind of surrounding infrastructure investment, whether it's landscaping and horticulture, I mean, there's a significant opportunity to develop workforce training programs where we are supporting, again, like Westminster High Schools, their greenhouse. They grow a ton of plants at the beginning of the year, buying plants that they're growing, putting them directly into our landscaping, creating jobs where the maintenance and the installation and the design of that landscaping comes from within the local community. The third pillar is really around business development, and it's kind of two-pronged in my view. One, it's really being proactive to support the existing small businesses. I know that small businesses are severely impacted right now, the economic situation with COVID, and so we want to make sure that we are building partnerships with other nonprofits, with the Economic Development Office, with other business lenders and technical assistance providers, ensuring that we are strengthening the fabric of existing small businesses so that they are well primed to take advantage of all the new households through the Uplands project. And then secondly, it's really about creating the programs, the capital, the infrastructure to help catalyze new businesses and aspiring entrepreneurs to take advantage of this new development. And that could look like commercial space in the development that is affordable, attainable, right-sized fit kiosks. So somebody can pilot a concept and incubate their business without having to outlay a ton of capital and take on a big risk. Creating, again, like wraparound services that are helping with marketing, with business planning, with access to capital. These are all, I think, kind of core tenets to how we plan on building a strong, resilient, and local community. And then finally, and it's not really the last pyramid or pillar, but it's civic engagement. And I think that that's kind of the ethos that is, again, sort of thread throughout all of the work that the collective will be doing. That's everything from highlighting existing nonprofit organizations, making sure that we are pointing the spotlight on our community, that we're helping get people plugged in to being actively involved in creating a positive community, of shaping that vision for the future, of building a strong neighborhood where we can turn to our neighbors in times of crisis and know that we have somebody to depend on, and really cultivating that pride in place and saying, this is what we believe we represent, and we know that we are proud to live here. We're engaged in many different civic aspects. So over the past couple of months during the COVID crisis, we have been working with a number of partners, a couple that I just want to highlight here. Westminster Public School Foundation. Early on in the crisis, I connected with their executive director and just trying to get a better sense of how much increase of food insecure families that they were seeing showing up to school meal sites. We were able to help with some resources that was able to expand their existing food and nutrition program, which at the time was limited to only students or families that had kids. They were seeing an influx of adults and homeless population and other people that didn't have kids but that needed food assistance. And so being able to make a contribution that would help them provide that additional need. And then Westminster High School, we helped them win I believe it was a Pell Grant. I can't remember the exact grant name. There's a competitive grant to support a career and technical education expansion where they're aligning their culinary program with their ag program, and students that are running a greenhouse are going to be working directly with the culinary program to start a food truck and kind of menu plan and farm plan together. And so we were able to provide some support to that process. They just were awarded that grant, which is really exciting. And then finally, and in kind of light of time, I've got 3 sort of action steps on how you can get involved. As I mentioned, our website just launched today. If there are any kinks and bugs, I'd appreciate it if you contact me. My contact will be on the next page. But uplandscommunitycollective.org/ and then go to take action. And there's 3 ways you can get involved right now. The first is applying for our advisory board. So we're actively building partners and looking for engaged stakeholders that want to sit on the advisory board. Job description will be posted soon, and we'll be kind of figuring out how to do this virtually, but very excited to begin building those partners and really have more people involved in the collective vision moving forward. I've set up an online platform through an app called Mobilize, where we're going to be building an online community right now. We can begin digging into pressing issues, forming committees, and really kind of increasing the amount of community engagement. And then finally is, if you haven't already signed up for our mailing list, just make sure that you're not missing any updates and other ways to get involved. Oh, it looks like my screen. Marcus, do you have control now?
I'm going to let us take back control if that's okay, Eric.
Yep.
Great.
Do you have the?
Do you need that last slide back up?
If anybody needs my contact info.
Yeah, Jasper, can you actually give control back to Eric, please? Sorry, folks, just we had to have a glitch somewhere here. While we have one quick break, I just want to tell everybody, the Q&A, if you go to your Q&A button as an attendee, when we answer a question, it publishes it so you can all see it as an answered question. We have done that. We have a few more to move over that category, so everyone will be able to see all of the questions. So we're not trying to hide anything. We'll be completely transparent. We'll put all of this on a website, but I just want you to see, if you go to that Q&A, you go to answered, and you can see a list of the questions, and I will walk through them in just a minute. So Eric, did you get control back, or maybe that's not happening? There you go.
Great. So my contact info, please email me. I'm happy to answer any questions directly. Set up a time if you'd like to connect on Zoom or a phone call. And our social media channels are there: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're trying to increase our activity there. So please take down my email and be in touch, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Great. We are going to have Eric be part of our Q&A team here as well. There's actually a number of question Eric's that are specific to the collective. So again, we're going to transition now. I think it's 6:15. We've done great. 6:20. We will have at least 30 minutes of Q&A here and try to work through them. Right now, I see about 15 questions total, so I think we can probably do that. I'll say this to all the panelists. So now we have the rest of our team that can answer specific questions. If we can try to be to the point with our answers so we can get through as many as possible. I'll read them. The first question that we had is, considering that the entire surrounding area is more of a one-story ranch, how is what being proposed in any way fits with the surrounding existing neighborhood? So I think they say, and then they go on to say that question has been asked repeatedly, and we haven't heard an answer yet that makes any sense to the questioner. So Bonnie or whoever would like to answer that, if you want to start there, or maybe Paul, but let's talk about kind of how you transition from one-story ranch homes into this neighborhood.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to address with that. The first thing, for those of you who maybe signed in late, within the preliminary development plan, we've stripped out a lot of the detail because we want to open up the opportunity to have more conversations about that and define it within each of the official site development plans. So we would like to hear from you when Marcus went through all the different charrette options and the continued community outreach that we plan to have in the next few months. We want to hear some of those conversations from you. So there are a variety of different ways that we can look at that. One of them is the perimeter buffer and what that space is, what that landscape material looks like. Is there berming? Is there trees? Those details. So we'd like to sit down with, our adjacent property owners and study some of those details. The other piece to keep in mind with that is the city anticipated for this to be a relatively higher, denser parcel compared to its surroundings. So the comp plan land use designation allows for 18 DUs per acre. We're planning for 10 DUs per acre, for example, within that parcel. So we have reduced the density quite a bit, but we want to work through those details and what that architecture looks like and what those homes look like on the perimeter within these next couple months as we go through these charrettes.
I will just add here, I think the follow-up question actually from the same questioner is, considering the looming climate crisis, is any planning being done to make sure the homes in these areas will be super insulated or otherwise of an energy efficient standard? First of all, I'd like to just say that the very first way we're being responsive to the looming climate crisis, which I completely agree with you, is actually not having all large lot ranch style homes. That's the very first thing we can do, is actually make that transition to a smaller lot, to a more responsible lot, so we don't use as much water and all of that. So the first step is actually making that transition to the type of home. Jeff or somebody, if you want to add a little bit more about the specifics of what we're doing on the energy side of things to make these a very efficient product.
Sure, happy to do that. This is Jeff Handlin, and I've been involved in this project for more than a half a decade. And I can tell you that in terms of water sensitivity, water conscious design, and climate sensitive design, that's been a leading design principle for us, regardless of what is required by the city or the county or the state. It's been a leading design principle for us from the beginning. You'll see in all of our homes that when you look at them empirically, from a what's called a HERS score, which is really a measure of efficiency of your home, that we're far and away more efficient, both in terms of materials and energy usage, in particular water and heating and cooling, than existing homes in the area. And that's easily provable via HERS scores and things like that. So that's another thing I would add, is that breathe easy, in the sense that not only is our landscaping more water responsive than the standards that exist today, not only is our construction going to be much more efficient than the existing product you'll see in your neighborhoods today from an energy usage perspective. But again, I will reinforce what Marcus said. More than half, or roughly half, of a home's usage is outside. It's in the landscaping and sod. And so that's another big opportunity for us, is in terms of lot typology. So thanks for that opportunity, Marcus.
I think the next question, I'm just going to kind of give a little audible here. We have two questions that are in this highly constrained presentation. If only panelists are able to see the chat and Q&A, how do you all get to see that we're answering all the questions? How do you all get to see it? So here's what I'm going to say. Every one of you that joined the meeting tonight, you got a website link to log into this Zoom. We will send back to you in the next number of days a list of this Q&A and the question and our answers. So I just want you to know this will be completely transparent. The functionality of these types of meetings is different at every function. So we're not trying to hide anything. It just allows us to actually work through the questions. So we will make all of this available to all of you. There's a couple of comments about that. Another simple question or a straightforward question to answer: what is a charrette? I use that word a lot. It's generally kind of an intense period of design or planning activity. It's a collaborative process. So a charrette is just that. It's a workshop to really talk about those transitions, that open space, the park amenities, whatever it is, but literally to sit around virtually or in person to work through kind of a community planning on the site. So that is a charrette. So we're going to move from that. Eric, a question for you. Is your nonprofit a 501c3? Also, have you considered reducing density or spreading out the dwellings more in light of the pandemic? That's probably a two-part. So why don't you take the first part on the nonprofit?
Yep, I'll take the first part. We're working on our 501c3 application to the IRS. We are currently incorporated as a nonprofit in the state of Colorado. This question does come up a lot in the nonprofit sector. Technically, you do not have to have a 501c3 designation to be a nonprofit. That's a tax advantage status that allows you to take donations from the public and do so where they receive a tax write-off. We can still take donations, we can still operate as a nonprofit, but we currently don't have the tax exempt status.
Great. So I'm just going to put this out there for maybe it's Bonnie or Jeff, whoever wants to answer this. But the question was, have you considered reducing density or spreading out the dwellings more in light of the pandemic? That might also just be the follow-up to that is, are there influences of the pandemic here that are going through our planning operation? So maybe if somebody wants to address that.
This is Jeff. I can address that, and I'll also pick up real quick for you, Marcus, just another question that was asked about the collective.
Great.
And that was, how is it funded presently, which kind of is a pretty good transition from the 501c3 conversation. So the history behind the collective, and this is really something that has evolved over the last 3 years in particular, is just loads and loads of meetings with community stakeholders, in particular, spending a lot of time, frankly, in the schools and the boundary schools surrounding this project, and talking to the teachers and to administration about what they were seeing and what they need. One of the things that jumped out to us right away is some of the health markers that we're seeing in the neighborhood, and also the percentage of free and reduced lunch participation at the boundary schools. Those indicated to us that we had bigger challenges to help out with here, and if we were going to be successful over the long term, we know that we're symbiotic with our existing neighbors. So thank goodness we found Eric and really pursued him for over a year until we found the right fit. But I will say that Eric's work right now is being funded by the Uplands, but the concept with the collective is that we're funding that to get it started. I think Eric did a good job of explaining nonprofit status. But one of the reasons that Eric took over and was hired as the executive director is he has deep grant relationships in national foundations, state foundations, and others. And so, just as one example, and Eric's really humble, so he probably wouldn't mention it, but he was integral in helping the Westminster School District, Westminster Public Schools, just apply for a $250,000 federal grant that will allow the school to enhance their greenhouse and buy a food truck and be in the food business. Now that's something I think, and this kind of transitions into the second question, is what has changed in our plan since the pandemic broke in February, March? And I think that one of the things that you'll see from us consistently, and this is something we haven't really done in the public yet, but we've been working privately on it quite a bit, is some of the workforce development and business development principles that Eric mentioned. We're really, our thesis is post-COVID, folks are going to shop probably closer to home. And retail is going to feel a lot more a lot more neighborhood than retail compared to the past. And so what does that tell us? That tells us that early on in this project, before there is a quote town center type of hub commercial and other activity, we're going to have to seek out those folks that have existing businesses, that have existing food trucks, that have existing food and beverage operations that we can invite in on a temporal and seasonal and event-based basis. So that's one of the things I think I can see changing is commercial and retail is going to change a lot. I would also point out that in terms of density, we looked really hard. You know, we're a member of a lot of urban planning organizations, and we've kept in touch with the state here, as well as a couple of other planning organizations in other states. There is no empirical link between medium density areas, like what we're proposing, and COVID infection rates or hospitalization rates, et cetera. It's important to note that we're not talking about Manhattan here. We're not even talking about Lodo. We're talking about medium density that will look more like traditional neighborhood. And so in that density range, there hasn't been any kind of connections between that and COVID. In terms of the density question, you know, there's only so much reducing density that the project will allow, very frankly, from a financial perspective. We're building almost half of what we're allowed to build. I think there was a question out there on the forum, you know, how many homes are you building? Just for everybody's edification, you can find this on our website easily, but we propose around 2,350 homes, and then a number of businesses and commercial operations, including offices. But that's compared to, you know, that's about 10 dwelling units per acre, and we're allowed to do 18, so almost double that. So I guess that's how I would address the question on density and COVID.
Great. I think that's very fair. So next question that I came up, and I think it actually came from the chat room, is what has changed since the hearing? So since the public city council hearing in February, and specifically Westminster is still dealing with water issues and traffic issues. So we need answers on water and traffic. So I guess maybe Todd, if you're here able, if you want to address just a little bit the water issue specifically, and then perhaps transition to traffic. And I'll let him get his, you all right, Todd? You're there?
Yep. Hope we can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, we have continued to work with the city on the infrastructure for the project. So we've identified the impacts that we will have to the existing systems. And we have been closely working with the city on what the mitigation measures will be. So as far as water and sewer go, we've analyzed, again, not only our impacts, but a little broader look at the impacts that are adjacent to us to make sure that we're not impacting anything else. From a water side, the project has already received some budgeting of water or an idea of how much water was out there before. We've actually worked into that number and below that number. And it goes back to what we've also been talking about here and how we lay out the lots and the water efficiencies that we're seeing there. So we feel that from a water perspective, we fit in very well with what the city has looked at and what we have planned. And from a transportation perspective, again, as we mentioned in our public presentations, we're actually bringing expansion to these roadways. And I think another important factor is we're providing a lot of safety measures that are currently lacking out there within this area. So most of our roadways around this project are being expanded and substantially expanded, I would say, from a point of a 2-lane road to sometimes a 3 or 4-lane roadway. Bike lanes, we also have wider sidewalks throughout this area, and we're connecting these sidewalks where those vital links are not there today. And also trying to propose traffic signals in some newer locations like 86 and Federal, which is a very dangerous intersection today. And so this project actually helps, again, build and mitigate those measures and actually build those safety improvements.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to a couple other, there's a couple of questions. I'm just going to skip around here a little bit. Bonnie, maybe this is for you. This is, what is the expectation per acre unit for parcel B? So I think it's per units per acre is what they're asking. And what is the phase development timeline specifically on parcel B? So closer to Observatory Heights and then northern transition to Shaw Heights.
Yeah, absolutely. So parcel B, so that's our southwest parcel at the southwest corner of 84th and Lowell. So that one is split into 2 parcels. So north of Bradburn, we are proposing a maximum density of 5 dwelling units per acre, which is 82 homes, which is in compliance with the comp plan. The parcel to the south of Bradburn, we are proposing in the PDP a maximum of 26 homes, which is approximately 2 dwelling units per acre, and it's below the maximum 5 dwelling units per acre.
Great. And then another infrastructure question here. Do you foresee expansions of 84th, Lowell, North-South, 88th, 86th, Clay, Decatur, and 87th? So Bonnie, I can go through any number of those, or excuse me, Todd, maybe foresee expansions of 84th and 88th, and then maybe talk about Lowell, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so 84th will be expanded. Again, currently it's a two-lane roadway. We would be expanding out to provide that additional capacity, not only for impacts from our development, but also to assist in the growing community as well, or just additional transportation needs that are out there from the community. So 84th is getting expanded between Federal and Lowell. 88th is similar. There's not a formalized edge on the south side there along the property, so we'll be expanding that roadway to add parking, bike lanes, and safety improvements with the intersections. And then Lowell will actually see one of the better improvements or safety improvements from that perspective. Again, we'll have we'll maintain parking that's in front of the residents there today. We'll add bike lanes and also additional laneage and provide that additional safety within that corridor, and wider sidewalks on this corridor to help with the multimodal transportation elements. And then also in Federal, we'll be expanding from a 4-lane roadway to a 6-lane facility projected right now through 84th up to 88th, and also major improvements there at the intersections of 84th and 88th to accommodate safety and those additional lanes.
So Todd, a follow-up there that somebody had is, Federal is CDOT or CDOT controlled. So how can we make changes to Federal when it's under CDOT?
We actually work very closely with CDOT, just like we would with the city. Typically, a developer is responsible for improvements, even if it is CDOT. And we've been in a couple meetings with them. We've also been working closely with the federal mobility project that is through this entire corridor, not only through our site, but to the north and to the south. So again, we're working closely with them. And the city would look for us to do these improvements. And it's, again, typical for us with the impacts that we may have for a project to do those improvements and help assist the city and CDOT on those things.
Terrific. Just a kind of a time update for everybody. We're at about 6:37. I think we just keep going here at till 7. We haven't had, I don't think, anybody drop off. So just know, I know folks will have some people drop off in the next little bit. We'll continue to answer questions here through 7. And again, we'll make all of these questions public with our answers. Sorry, my computer screen, I know my camera, so it looks like I'm looking down. But one thing I do want to say, there's been a number of comments about, hey, this is the same process that you've all showed us before. What's the change here in the engagement? I just want to say it is fundamentally different than anything we've proposed before in a very specific way. We are now talking about site planning, right? We are now talking about individual parcels and actually what we're submitting to the PDP or to the city on a PDP or an ODP. And so as you all know, when we make that submittal to the city, that's a viewable document. We can link that document. So what we want to do is actually engage on what those transitions are, what the homes look like, what the sidewalks, the parks, all of these things that we've been talking about tonight. So it's no longer kind of a philosophical discussion about densities. It's actually about a specific. So a lot of these questions, and I think that's something that we want to go over, is we can answer now in more details. We want to show you a cross section of Lowell, right? And really talk about what Lowell acts like, how it connects to Shaw Heights, etc. So I hope you understand that is a fundamental difference, and we think a real opportunity to work with all of you on that. A couple other questions. I'm going to go back to the answered questions. Again, we just did that so people could see them. Let me just go through. I think there's a few more collective questions, Eric. So a couple more that were kind of comments about, does the collective address traffic, water, and sewer issues? So concerns that people have maybe about density or traffic, is that something the collective engages on, or are you separate from that part of the discussion?
Well, thankfully, no. That's not my area of expertise, and not something that I or the collective involved with. That would be on the Uplands team. So I believe anybody on the call could answer that.
Great. And I just wanted to make clear to folks, that is not what we envision for the collective. I think that's a very important separation, right? Eric is not involved in those discussions. What we heard from people was ongoing issues that would go on. Somebody else suggested that, hey, do you even know that existing residents are helping the neighbors, right? Do we realize that, and why is there a need for a collective? Somebody else made a comment that the city provides a lot of these services. So Eric, maybe why is there a need for a nonprofit here, and what is perhaps the opportunity that's not being provided by other agencies? We're certainly not questioning what other or existing residents do for each other now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I fully recognize that there is a lot of neighborliness and mutual support and great nonprofits and great public servants and agencies that are doing a lot of good. I think when you look at the data, though, we still see some pretty big discrepancies, whether it's healthy food access, whether it's expected outcomes in terms of education, job attainability, you name it. I mean, and that's not ununique to a city, right? We have a history of some communities get more resources than others, and there is a lot of work that is required on many, many levels by many organizations and partners to make sure that everybody has equitable access to resources and they can achieve good quality of life. And so I think that for the collective, and I apologize if I went a little too long into my background, my purpose there was trying to show that there is I believe, I have a track record of demonstrating a different angle to take in terms of nonprofit community development, one that really centers around equity and inclusion and diversity, and really empowering the community to solve these issues and be at the forefront. And I am part of a bigger sort of community wealth building effort that is really looking at, well, how do we close gaps in economics and wealth and income? And so there's a lot of work to be done. And to anybody on this call, I'm happy to reach out one-on-one, and I would love the opportunity to meet you, learn your story, and figure out how we can work together.
Yeah, and I will just add, and maybe this is a commentary, but I think particularly today, we are in a time when we are speaking about community benefit and how are there ways to augment existing services. So if our fault here in forming the collective and finding somebody to go work on these kind of larger issues is that we're trying to augment what's already there, then we'll take that criticism. I think that's a good thing to do, to add to. In no way are we suggesting that we know the community better than neighbors. We know it better than the city. We frankly want to learn from everybody about how to make this a better place for everybody. So for whatever that is, I think that's an important thing to just notice. That's the goal of this. Hopefully we really meet all our goals, but I know people will let us know if we're falling short. There's a question here that's more, go ahead. I see Jeff, go ahead.
Marcus, I just wanted to add, and this is Jeff Hamlin. Hi, I think I finally sorted this video stuff out. Eric is very humble, but one of the things he could mention is the work he's already doing with Growing Home, which is a really important regional food pantry for Westminster and for Southern Adams County, Federal Heights, and Shaw Heights. In addition to that, he's working with Maker Housing, which is Adams County Housing Agency. Those folks in that world work together really carefully. And I think it's really important that those organizations do not perceive Eric or the collective as a threat. They perceive it as an additional resource. The way I would distinguish the collective's work versus some of the amazing agencies, including Westminster Legacy Foundation and others that we've been spending time with over the last couple of years, is it's super hyper local. And its stated purpose is to make sure we do it right this time. that if we're putting $1 billion of cost into the ground over the next 10 to 12, 15 years, let's do that in a way that empowers the existing residents, both in terms of work, food, education, and civic engagement. And so we are not in the business of this nonprofit. We recognize we were over our skis, so to speak, and we're very lucky to have Eric. But that's the only thing I would add is that, and the other thing I would add is that to address someone's question about our neighborhood's great, and I do think that we all believe that the neighborhood's great. Otherwise, we wouldn't be interested in developing the Uplands. That being said, all great neighborhoods have issues that need to be wrinkled out. And if you looked at the health markers down at the Community Health Center on 84th that Centura operates, at the same time as you look at the school outcomes that comes out of the public schools, I think we can all recognize that maybe we could all do more. Not just the neighbors, but maybe us. And that's the reason that we were really intent, and I was really intent on making sure we started the collective. So that's the only thing I would add there, Marcus.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No problem. That's great. And I think there's a couple of just quick hit answers here. Bonnie, if you'll be on deck here, and Todd. So a couple of them specifically have asked about Parcel E. And just so you all remember, Parcel E is at the northeast corner of the site, kind of adjacent to Kamenish Park there. And the question is, in the public hearing at City Council, we suggested that that was going to be a public or be given to the city. I just want to clarify, Bonnie, will you walk through what the land use comp plan designation is for that site and what it will function as?
Absolutely. So that Parcel E has been designated as private parks and private open space at our hearing earlier this year. That does not mean that the use has to be private. It just means that the city will not own or maintain it, but it can still have a public access easement. It can still be open to the public. We plan to build an extensive trail to connect people to that. We had talked to the city about dedicating it to them. They really wanted to make sure to focus the public land dedication on really key areas that would benefit as many people as possible. That 1 acre site has a lot of utilities and topography to work around, and so there just wasn't as much value as some of the larger, more accessible parcels that we outlined earlier for actual public land dedication. So
Sure.
the comp plan land use designated as private parks and open space, we intend to keep it under that designation, but it doesn't mean it has to be private. We can put public access on it.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Additionally, a specific question, are you still considering a viewing site, the view corridor, mountains, sunsets, etc., more on top of Lowell on the west side? Or if it's not there, where are we considering kind of this viewing area to look west to the mountains?
Yeah, absolutely. So those of you that maybe missed the beginning of the presentation, we walked through Parcel B at 84th and Lowell in quite a bit of detail. And this will be shown on the updated preliminary development plan that we'll be submitting later this month and accessible on the city's website. But we are showing 3 acre public land dedication on the very southern end of that property. Just to the north of that, we have a more than 3 acre view corridor as identified in the comp plan. And then north of that on Bradburn, we have another 3 acres. So that's more than 10 acres of land that will not be developed on and will be open for that view corridor.
Great. Another question here, maybe Todd, is specifically, how do you slow down traffic with all these or this additional traffic? How do more cars slow down traffic? So I think that's another question of how are we implementing kind of the traffic flow or to slow down the area?
Regarding speed, or maybe it's termed a lot of times as traffic calming, just to get it into a contextual standpoint of, are we in a neighborhood? Are we trying to move traffic like on Federal from point A to point B a little faster? But I would say this question is probably a little more towards Lowell, and how do we make sure that we're not designing a roadway that turns that into a drag strip and people are doing 55 through there. We try to keep it in the context of how it lives. And so we have residents that come off and utilize that as a local access. We don't want to make the lanes too wide so that people feel like they can drive faster. We also look for calming measures. And so at intersections, we look to a lot of times do some curb extensions to slow things down, or if it's needed, through this corridor, and we are going to work again very closely with the city on this particular issue. Is just other elements that may be needed in this corridor to help provide that calming message in this area. But that is again a safety improvement that we are always looking at when we design roadways. It's not only just trying to push traffic from point A to point B, it's also the multimodal concepts that are through this area and making sure that it fits within the context of where it lives.
Yeah, and I'll just say, one of the beauties about virtual meetings is you get almost like live reaction, right, Todd? So one of the comments that came in as you were speaking was, Lowell is already a drag strip. And I think we're just going to take this opportunity to say we completely agree. And a fundamental portion or an ethos of planning is that the mere fact that there is not a developed edge, the whole eastern edge of Lowell is unfinished, right, between 84th and 88th. There's not a sidewalk, there's not lights, there are no development there. There's no homes. There's no parks. There's no transitions. That very openness of that is one of the reasons there is a drag strip. So really adding eyes to the street, it naturally calms and slows all of us down. So that's a fundamental issue that Todd was just describing. We're not disagreeing with you that there is heavy and fast traffic, particularly in the evenings on Lowell. So we actually think this has a very calming effect on that. I think another one that kind of is in the same genre, there's a comment about how do we feel safer, right? We've seen a rise in crime in Shaw Heights area. And then the premise is stated that more homes, more crime. I'm just going to say I probably disagree with the premise of that more homes means more crime. But how is it, somebody on the team, that development or a neighborhood actually should make the surrounding neighborhoods feel safer? What does that do? How do the surrounding communities feel safer with this development? And maybe it's Jeff, Bonnie, whoever wants to jump in on that.
I can give my 2 cents, and then, Bonnie can come in from a professional perspective. I can tell you that during my entire career, I've done a lot of these master plan communities, and we've studied extensively the effect that Denver new urbanist infill projects have had on the surrounding communities, including things like home values, school scores, incomes, and crime. And there is not an empirical correlation between a developing neighborhood like we're talking about. Say, for example, the comp set would include Lowry, for example, and Stapleton and things like that. That is not over time what has happened. And so I know that is a common refrain, but I'd have to agree with you, Marcus, that I disagree with the premise that more homes equals more crimes. I think it really matters what kinds of home and what kind of community it is. And one of the important things that we insisted upon is this is not a project that has boundaries. And so what we're doing here is very porous, designed to go both ways, for the community to move inside of this previously private property, and for our residents and community to interact with the folks on the outside. We think that's a positive. We think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But again, I disagree that there is a statistical correlation in these types of projects. I can't tell you the statistical correlation between, more different types of projects, but these types of infill projects don't have that effect.
Okay, great. I think I'm going to go. Bonnie, did you have anything to add there?
No.
Just be ready. Here's a specific one for you. So this was a question about the eastern view from the Shaw Heights neighborhood. I'm looking at a map here in my office. So obviously that's a view back across the site, across what is the Pillar of Fire land today. So how are we addressing that eastern view from the neighborhood into the site?
Marcus, you want to pull up that last slide we have that kind of shows the overall map? Perfect. Thank you.
See things changing and my hands aren't moving. It's a good trick. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is the overall land use sheet from our preliminary development plan, which you can all have links to once we make this submittal. It's all on the city's website. So there's a few key pieces and kind of key corridors that will create that east-west view from Lowell and from Shaw Heights. And it's where you see kind of these thicker dashed street lines. So on the north end at 87th, so you can see that large rectangular hatched portion, that's public land dedication, that's 11 acres. So you will see the view from Shaw Heights will be of that park. If you go down to the middle of that parcel, which is generally at 86th, you can see we have a local road, so that will be open from development, and then you'll see there's another hatched area. So that's a 10-acre public park. So that's not developed with homes. So that full east-west corridor from Lowell to Federal has corresponding access points at Lowell and Federal. And so that is clear of development, that whole east-west length. And then on the bottom side of that same parcel at 85th, some of you who've seen our previous presentations might remember we have a 5-acre detention pond at that western location right along Lowell. We had previously asked to count that in public land dedication. We are no longer doing that, but that detention pond will still exist there. So that will be a green detention pond on that edge instead of homes, and then transitioning to that east-west street corridor as we move east.
Great. Thank you, Bonnie. I think this next question, and there's a couple of comments. We've probably had about 20 questions roll in here in the last 10 minutes. So if we don't get to all of them, we're at 6:55 right now. Again, we'll answer them. There's a couple of them that are generally in kind of more of a comment about how is it that Uplands, how is it that our team knows what's best for our neighborhood? And listen, I think it's just, I don't know how to say it and to say it authentically. We're in no way suggesting that we know what is best for your neighborhood. We know you are existing neighbors. We know you have lived in this community, many of you for 20, 30, 40 or longer. We've talked to residents in Observatory Heights that have lived there for over 60 years. So there is not one person on our teams that think we know the neighborhood better. And I'll say this, though, I think the city also really envisions and protects the viewpoints, the view corridors, the opinions that you have about your neighborhood. It is our responsibility to try to be as transparent and try to talk to you all so we can actually get that feedback about incorporating those values, those things that you all treasure so much about your great neighborhood into this site. So I'm sorry if we're coming across in any way like we're saying this is what's right for you. We don't feel that way. I'm sorry if we're coming across that way, but that is not our goal. Our goal is to follow the comp plan and hear from all of you. So that's the idea why we want to do these more small group charrettes. You tell us about things that we're missing and maybe how to transition that better into our site plan. So I just want to make that comment. Are you putting, the last question here, or another question is, are you putting apartments on Federal any longer? So if somebody can ask maybe on the Federal corridor, whether that's on parcel A or parcel C, are we still considering apartments on the Federal corridor?
Yeah, I can answer that. And this is actually a perfect slide. So again, focusing on kind of the center square parcel A. So if you look at Federal Boulevard, there's kind of between 85th and 87th, my apologies. That's what we're considering our village center. So within this parcel, that's the only location that multifamily or apartment uses are allowed. The balance of the parcels are single family detached and single family attached, such as townhomes. So we do anticipate that there will be apartments along Federal Boulevard. I think this comment came up specifically when we were talking about that view corridor. So the apartments would likely frame the entry at 86th, but there would still be that connection coming through. So we do anticipate there will be apartments within parcel A. They're only planned to be located in that area along Federal between 85th and 87th.
Okay, great. So we've got time for 2 more questions. We've got a couple minutes to go here. And Jasper, if I may ask you to go ahead and put the screen up that has our email address again. It's infos@uplandscolorado.com. So info uplands with an S, Colorado spelled out.com. So if you would please send us an email. If you have any questions, something we missed, something you'd like to talk to us, if you want to talk to the collective and meet with Eric and his team, we'd be happy to set that up. I think the last 2 things I'm just going to go to here. Sorry, I'm updating. There's a question about who owns the land today. So I assume that's referring to all 5 parcels. So can we just get a clarification on who actually owns the land today?
So I'll take that one. This is Jeff. You know, the land is owned by the same entity that's owned it for 100 years. And so our role is the developer, they're the landowner until we get through the approval process. I hope that helps. The other thing, Marcus, I was going to just jump in on is two questions I thought were really important for us to address head on. One is, I don't think the person that posted it felt like we were addressing how we are consistent with ranch homes on larger conventional suburban detached lots. And one of the important things I think to remember about this process is that we didn't dictate the land use for this project. The city did that many, many, many years ago. And they put it in their comprehensive plan as traditional mixed use neighborhood development. And what that allows, I mean, that's parcel A. There are other parcels, the other out parcels have different designations, but the largest parcel is TMUND. And TMUND, traditional mixed use neighborhood development, has its own design guidelines. And nowhere in those design guidelines does it dictate that you're allowed to do large lot, single family detached ranches. In the end of the day, the city dictated what they wanted to see here, not us. We're responding to that as folks in the industry should, to build a new urbanist project. I hope that helps answer that question. And then lastly, in terms of, I think someone asked a really good question, which is, we've addressed some of the challenges that this neighborhood and more importantly, the region, not necessarily the neighborhood, the region might have with regards to health, with regards to education, with regards to mobility, et cetera. And the person asked me to address what is right with this community. And I think that's a fair question. And sometimes we focus on the things we're trying to fix so much because we're earnest in our attempts to fix those, that we don't focus on what's right with this community. So let me just say very briefly what is right with this region, this community, and this neighborhood. And I would say that we wouldn't have toiled for 7 years to attempt to put this project in front of you if we didn't think there's an awful lot right about this community. There's a lot of good people that are in really important situations, school board members, Front Range Community College folks, foundation folks that we have found that are helpers. And I'd say that's your biggest asset in this community. Other than its location, you happen to be right in between Denver and Boulder, glowing with jobs. And so there's a lot right with this community. We see the sense of community. We've gotten to know the shop owners along Federal that are immediately adjacent to us. And we see how they're struggling and they would like some infusion of investment and infrastructure. So what I'd say is there's an awful lot right with that community, both locationally and the people that are there. And I'm hoping that that comes through in what we're talking about. Don't think that we're trying to impute that this is a troubled neighborhood. We would not be trying to invest $1 billion here if we thought it was troubled. We do think that there are things that we can improve diversity, equity, and inclusion on, yes. And we can do this in a more thoughtful manner than maybe that was done in the past, but that doesn't impute that there's a lot wrong with that community.
Great.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, that's going to be our parting comments, if you will. I'm just going to say the last question I received on the chat was if we could provide some specific contact information so people can be involved, like on discussions on parcel B, the individual parcel that you live by. So what we're going to do to all of you is we're actually going to designate some folks to say, if you want to talk about parcel B, particularly on a planning area, here's the contact information. And actually, here's when we're going to have that small group meeting to meet with Observatory Heights or neighbors to the north of the site that want to talk about Bradburn and the homes in that development. So we will send that back out in our Q&A response. So just please look for that there. And then of course you can also contact info@uplandscolorado.com and we'll get back to you directly on that email address as well. So with that, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all very much. We had up to 50 attendees or more tonight at different times. We're still at 40. Thank you very much for your time and your attention and for caring about this amazing and wonderful community and allowing us. We just want to be part of it and we need that input from all of you. So we look forward to our next engagement. We'll certainly be back in touch with everyone and have hopefully an in-person meeting, but we all will continue to work through the times that we're in. So thank you all very much and have a great evening. Good night.